how much money should you be spending on creative production relative to your ad spend if you're trying to grow your ad account more and you're sort of past the big wins phase?
We have spent so much time recently thinking about the operational system that's related to creative production. I think it is a huge gap in the way that most people work because every ad is functionally a bet.
That's right.
Okay. Which means it has a cost
Yep.
and it has an expected value.
Yep.
And the relationship between those two things is wildly important. For those of you that are new to this, this is our second random show. This is inspired by Tim Faris and Kevin Rose, who are two obviously podcasters who would get together and just talk about life. And so this is an excuse for Andrew and I to hang out and catch up because we don't get to as much as we used to for a myriad of reasons. But so we're selfishly using this as a chance to catch up and then with a bunch of random topics that aren't directly related to creative testing and
Yeah.
cost control.
No creative testing and cost control on this episode.
I mean, maybe we'll get there.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we'll do like last time, right? Some business. We got a few topics lined up for top of mind business stuff. This is like, you know, you and I just do this all the time. Like Marco Polo, here's the thing I've been thinking about, send you a video. And this is a good idea by you. Just like, hey, let's just sit and do this for a little while. So
Yeah, so we keep a Google Doc kind of running in between episodes of just stuff we come across that we think will be fun to discuss with each other. And
maybe a little bit of parenting, maybe a
little
little bit of
parenting,
training.
exactly, a little
Physical
training. Always some
Obviously.
baseball usually gets woven
Yeah.
in there, and hopefully you enjoy it.
People look at our two bodies and say, how do we get those bodies? Tell us what
Yeah,
you
we'll
do.
give you some fitness inspiration. So we'll
We're drinking beer.
Yeah, exactly.
What is this that you gave me? It just says beer on it.
So we share an office with one of our clients, Skull Candy, which is cool because people like the office and we use it for entertainment and other things. And
Sorry.
there's always stuff in the fridge. And so we have a couple brands that come by and use the studio to shoot production. And this is one of them. It's art by Meryl Smith at Meryl Smith Studio on Instagram. And it says open beer. And that's it. That's all I know, but it's
beer.
cool.
Cool. It's good.
Yeah. Fort Collins Brewing, New Belgium. I don't know.
Oh, that's funny. So it's like a New Belgium white label because
There
New
you go.
Belgium is, that's a big brewery. That's a Fat Tire.
Oh, okay.
That's that brewery. So
That makes
if
sense.
it's from them.
There you
That's
go.
cool. Collaboration with New Belgium.
Okay.
Openbrewing.com. Interesting. Cool. Well, it's good. Thanks for the beer.
So to kick things off, I think I'm going to ask you this every time because we sort of have an underlying bet, or at least I have a bet with myself about the inevitability.
Do you want to find some way to get yourself some upside in this bet?
I think you're going to lose so many bets to me, like you already have about your long form explainer for Bamboo Earth that you didn't make. And for those of you who tuned in the last episode,
I told you I wasn't going to make it. I have
Dave, can you please get with him and make him make you this ad?
I will. I should do it.
But
it would be. What do you? The problem with doing this with you is that even if I do it,
I
you will not
poke holes.
You will be like, oh, that's not the reason it worked. It's not because of the thing you said would work. Yeah.
But that's good because if you just don't do it, you can keep saying that.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah, everybody wins.
So my question is,
what is the thing that you never do you won't do with me? Typing test. You've been telling me you can beat me in a typing test for years. I'm so much faster. As I've told you before, I think it's possible that typing speed is actually the thing I'm best at in life.
Think you're aging though rapidly.
Yeah,
You have small children right now. Or your
error rate going up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So my question is,
okay,
are you building an agency yet? Or what's going on with AJF growth?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Are you an influencer?
Okay.
Who are you?
So good question. The short answer is no. And here's the definitive way to answer the question. I have no more clients in terms of total clients since we last talked about this.
Okay. Do you have employees?
Yes. The same numbers I had before.
Okay.
So I do have
2, 3?
2 in the US. Actually, I do have 1 more in the Philippines. So maybe a little step towards it.
Okay.
I have an additional
so you grew by
1 or
30%.
2 people.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. No, I could know because I had before 4 in the Philippines. Now I have 6 in the Philippines.
Okay. So you have 6 in
It's
the
basically
Philippines, 2
I
in the
added a
US?
designer to be able to support my current client load better as they grow. And then I added somebody to take over ad builds. So basically like the very, very sort of junior media buyer kind of.
How long ago did we record?
A couple months.
So
I don't remember how long.
every 2 months you grow 40% in size. I think we've got a real compounding agency.
It could be.
You might be 100 people in 2 years.
please don't let that be true.
You're headed.
No. Yeah. I don't think so. And I've actively said no to clients on account of not wanting to staff them with other people, etc. So I still do the client work. There's some slight tweaks to that. So I think one thing you're right about with this is that talented people need to grow, and like I added people who are talented.
Yeah.
So creating opportunity for them is important. But let's take this. So there's that. Let's take this back though a step, which I think is actually maybe a more interesting question for a lot of people. I remember hearing somebody say recently, maybe you'll know what the provenance of this is. I don't remember, but somebody was saying, I think on Twitter, that the basically like the opportunity you decide to pursue has like this massive impact on the potential outcome, right? Like essentially,
Sure.
like let's say I'm going to work 40 hours a week every week, okay, which
Mhm.
is about what I work. I don't tend to work a lot more hours than that, notwithstanding a week where I come down here at night sometime.
Sure.
I can apply the leverage of that 40 hours to any number of problems.
That's right.
And so the person was saying what everybody underestimates, that you're winning. What everybody underestimates is how important it is to pick the right thing to work on, right?
Yep.
This is sort of an obvious point, and yet what he says is that this point is obvious to everybody, and yet almost nobody thinks that hard about they don't take the time to
Yeah, they
really
happen
think
into things all
seriously.
the time.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I would say that's been a lot of my own career.
Yep.
And so I am at a spot now where, like I said, there's an additional demand for my
Yep.
services, and I have this decision to make, which is like, is that the best use of my time next? And what I am currently deciding is that it is not for a couple of reasons. So this guy was saying before he quit a job or something like that, and he took 3 months researching opportunities, trying to think through these from every angle. He basically tried to apply serious critical thinking to the selection of what problem he wanted to solve.
Mhm.
And you could take this on a very large scale, right? Like you could try to solve world hunger,
Yep.
or something like that at 40 hours a week and all that. And so there's this question for me career wise, which is like, okay, if I'm going to put in that much time, what is the actual highest leverage opportunity? So even aside from anything we talked about last time about like, is this about making the most money or whatever else? Like, however you define that, what should I actually do with my time? And is building an agency the thing that I want to do? The answer for me right now to that question. Well, let me pause. Do you have any thoughts about that idea of problem
Yeah.
selection?
Sure. I just don't think that's actually has anything to do with the framework that you're using to make decisions.
What do you mean?
Like, I don't think you're looking at your time and going, "What's the biggest leverage opportunity?" and trying to find it and allocate
You don't think
any
I'm doing that right now?
not at all. Well,
Mm,
because you just said you could choose world hunger, you could
yeah,
choose whatever. So I don't, or nor are you trying to choose the thing that you think could make you $1 billion. So I don't think it's
right.
about the highest leverage activity. I see you as operating. You have fairly low ambition monetarily, like, and
Definitely.
you're sort of
Yeah.
satisfied.
Yeah.
And so I think you're playing.
Yeah.
Like, even the thing that you just told me about, which I don't think we're talking about yet on camera, maybe we will in a couple
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
That is, like, insane to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's totally playing.
Yeah.
Like, it it doesn't feel like an actual attempt to apply the principle you just
Yeah.
described, you know?
So, well, it is if you, yeah. Well, we can't talk about that yet.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Maybe I'll roll that out someday on the random show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're right about that. And I think I think you can apply that advice imperfectly and still apply it better than if you don't think about it. Right. Like essentially, like if you apply the pick your problem advice
Yep.
within a smaller framework, even it's still helpful. Which is like and I mean, I guess everybody is trying to do this all the time, right? Like, what's the next best place to put my dollars or something like that, right? Is a question about ROI and some of that. So I'll go back to the original question. I think the most interesting opportunity for me right now, and I'll tell you how I got there, is continued content output and to do that across podcast and maybe newsletter and sort of audience growth around those things. And there's a positive and a negative reason for that. The negative reason is I do think I'm a bad process builder, and even aside from that potentially self-limiting belief, I don't like it at all. I take no joy in doing it, and so it just feels like work I absolutely have no
Yeah.
pleasure in. It's a bit like running as part of my workout routine. Like I would like to be able to run. I think you can't really be fit if you can't run. I don't like to go for a run. There's people who like just adore they runner's high, all that stuff. My wife's like that. Like, and I have no pleasure in it, but I'll do it because I need to. But I don't want to run all the time. I'm just not going to run a marathon anytime soon because it's just too much running for me.
Yep.
And that's how I feel about building processes. And actually, you're a big example of this, which is like what I've watched happen at CTC is that the more you've committed to build incredible process all the way down through your entire team,
Yeah.
the service has become incredible. And frankly, that's actually part of the reason I don't want to build an agency is because I don't want to compete with you. And what I mean is, I just feel like I don't think I could make my service good enough to where I wouldn't, to be able to look somebody in the eye and be like, you should choose me over CTC. Uh, you know, like, I think right now, I think for my particular kind of client that I can make that case credibly, but I just don't think I can. I just think your thing is too good. It's
Well,
too good.
you would fail a bunch of times on the way. I think you'd have to get
Yeah.
more okay with saying it being wrong.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
one of the biggest
yeah,
things I think it's actually one of the reasons I think a lot of agency owners stay small is they have this language that they use about how important quality of service to them
yeah,
is, but it's really just this sort of like trap that you fall into, which
yeah,
is that you get hung up on this idea that ever failing promise would be somehow so unallowable to you. But in reality, you fail all the time.
yeah,
Like it's just,
yeah,
and
sure.
your intention really matters in that
Yeah.
process.
I think you are retconning history so bad on your own story with this right now.
Retcon.
Retconning,
Let me
retroactive,
Google this real fast. Hold on.
continuity. It's
Retroactive. Can we add that to the discussion later?
retroactive no,
What does
I
this
think
mean?
no, it's when, like, TV shows or movies, I think the way to do it is,
you
like
you think I was hung up on quality
no, no,
as a
no.
limiting growth premise?
I think what you're retconning is how much it hurt right
Oh,
now. I
no
mean,
doubt. I'm not. I did. Did I say it wouldn't? I don't think
no,
I
no, no.
said it would.
I just think what you realized in the process of trying to scale CTC fast
Yeah.
in the way that you did, and I get pissed off when I hear people say that, like, "Oh, CTC that only cares about money," or it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
that's
insanity.
yeah,
But
right, right. Like, it's like, no, it's hard.
yeah.
It's not that he doesn't want, but like what I think is that you are underplaying right now, like, how much it hurt you personally when you realized your name was being associated with a quality of service that was bad.
Oh, for I
It's so my point is, like, you
well,
actually sat here on the podcast last time and said, "I wouldn't go back and do that again."
well, I okay. I mean, there's a
So
lot tied into
there's
that.
levels of failure that you are and are not willing to go.
For sure, but I don't think that we're talking about the level of the pain that I was describing last time being singularly associated with the failure of expert clients and the
Yeah.
perception of me in that. I think it was much broader than that.
Yeah.
A consequence of having to lay off so many people. Like
Yeah.
there was so much more than that. I don't think that you should be afraid to grow your business under the pretense that you may say to someone, I'm going to do my best to deliver this service for you, and you may fail in some way to do that.
Yeah.
Because I think you do that anyways.
Sure, yeah, of course.
So
But I think I just don't think I could do a good job right now training people to deliver service at a quality that I would feel good about.
what if you didn't have to train? What if they were actually additive to the quality all on their own? What if you found people smarter than you to partner with?
I still wouldn't have good process. I would still just be, like,
What if they
hiring.
were good at process?
Yeah. So that would actually be the way I would do it if I was gonna do it. I would have to find somebody who I could install on day 1 as essentially a COO, and from an early stage who saw vision for it, split the equity, whatever, you
Yeah.
know? That would be the way I would do it if I was gonna do it. I don't really wanna do that right now. I also like the control of owning 100% of my business and all that stuff. So, here's the other side of that, okay? To not get hung up on too long, is that I think one of my best skills is teaching and explaining things.
That's what its service business is.
Well, and so I think that there's a way to leverage that with content output, and yeah,
I think you should absolutely keep doing the content. And I think the greatest leverage application for it would be service. But what is a better leverage application for building the audience? What's the audience for?
for the content.
To monetize in what way? Like what's the end result?
Advertising partners and that sort of thing. People make a lot of money with newsletters and podcasts and stuff.
I don't know how many people in our space make more money than I do
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
So I know,
But
but that
but
pales in comparison to the money
yeah,
we
but
make in services.
yeah, but your thing is so yeah. Yeah. But how much money you could make from content is enough for me, you know?
That I think is the question.
And also I think there's a way in which there's the potential frustrations of a service business maybe would be different in a content business. There would still be frustrations. I know enough to know now that everything looks
Yeah.
greener on the other
So
side.
we'll just stop here. We'll just
Okay.
check back in.
Okay, great.
We'll check back in
Yeah.
next time as you continue to grow your
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
and continue to label it a. So what do we call it now, though?
I
It's
just call it an
a.
agency. I call it a boutique
Oh,
agency.
okay.
I mean, it's definitely an agency. It's just that it's a
So we've
boutique
we've
agency.
we've crossed the line from consultant, individual
Well,
freelancer to
yeah. As soon as I
agency.
hired people, I was willing to call it an agency.
So we've moved to boutique agency.
Yeah.
So maybe by the
Yeah.
next episode we'll be there.
Maybe
Okay,
so.
got it.
Maybe so. Yeah. What I mean, when you think about, well, we should move on because we've got a lot of other stuff to talk about. So
But the thing I'll put in the sand is like this thing that you're doing I unless it's like purely relational, is insane relative to the opportunity that you have in front of
What do you mean? What's the opportunity in front of me?
you for AJF growth.
You think it could be a bigger, better agency? Or
And
like an
we
agency
maybe
with
we
more
mute this.
financial. Yeah, right. I've been thinking about this thing specifically for brands that reach a particular leverage point. Because let's say you're sub $5 million,
Yep.
how much money should you spend on content
Yep.
relative to your ad spend? Okay.
Yep.
And my answer to that question is basically as little as possible.
Okay.
Like kind of simply, right? Like you can take you can up until five and five loosely, right? So maybe it's seven, maybe it's three, I don't know, whatever. But somewhere in that range, mid seven figures, you can have giant like steps forward in your ad account
Mhm.
by like saying the value proposition better. You know what I mean? Like essentially like big creative wins happen at that level of business to where you go from spending 50 grand a month to 150 grand a month off of two ads that got better, right?
Yep.
You have those moments. Those moments slow down over time though, right?
Yes.
You stop producing those kinds of step function growth in your spend on the one hand. On the other hand, e-commerce, I've actually been thinking about this recently. You can comment on this if you want, but I think somewhere around 3 to 4 million is one of the hardest phases of e-commerce because your business is big enough now to demand a lot from you, but you still have not reached true e-commerce economy of scale. Like it's really, I mean, they're probably all the phases of business are hard, but it's just a very hard phase of business, I think. Okay. But I think there's another phase for a lot of brands at least where they get to 10 plus million and they actually start to create more economy of scale in their business, particularly if they're disciplined about their OpEx. If they're disciplined about their OpEx, that's where you can begin to get to sub 10% OpEx pretty consistently. And if you have, let's say you've got a good margin, 65, 70 points of margin. If you've got a little bit of LTV in the business, your ad spend can become, 25, 30% of your P&L, whatever it is. And suddenly you can be running a business with like 20% bottom line, depending on how fast you're trying to grow, all those kinds of things. So now you may actually at that phase of business have some money to throw around and think about taking larger bets. This is something you've been talking about a lot recently, which I've really loved your conversations about this recently, actually. Like the idea of like think seriously for these brands about big product innovation, giant drops, big marketing moments. It's hard to do that when you're sub 10 million, right? I think. Maybe you disagree with that, but I think it's really, really hard to take too big of a swing there. So, okay, put all that together. There's this question for me that's interesting, really tactical. How much money should you be spending on creative production relative to your ad spend if you're trying to grow your ad account more
Mhm.
and you're sort of past the big wins phase?
Yeah.
Okay. So disagree with any of that part of the premise that you want, but that's what I've been thinking about.
So I we have spent so much time recently thinking about the operational system that's related to creative production. I think it is a huge gap in the way that most people work because every ad is functionally a bet.
That's right.
Okay. Which means it has a cost
Yep.
and it has an expected value.
Yep.
And the relationship between those two things is wildly important. So the question of how much you should spend is relative to the value that each unit you produce creates.
Mhm.
So, and I mean that in marginal value. So
Yep.
I'm looking at right now, we track, people may have seen my outlier ad series where we look at the spend that we can produce per ad. We'll look at this contribution margin per ad. It depends on, this is a brand where contribution margin per ad, the one I'm looking at, doesn't make sense because we drive to break even on first order. So it's like, it doesn't follow that. Like, so we think about it in spend. So if every ad produces, let's just use some easy math, $100 in spend, which we would say, is a measure for value. Okay. And let's just, for simple math, say that that creates $100 in revenue, whatever. Then there's the question of, okay, what is cost to produce that unit? And brands that can drive down the cost of production of that unit
Yep.
have massive leverage
Yep.
over other businesses in the same way you have low OpEx
Yep.
or great margin.
Yep.
Creative scale and production at low cost is a massive leverage point.
Yes.
So this is why AI, I think, is such an important part of this conversation because it's the biggest factor, I think, in potentially driving
Yep.
down cost per unit of production. So the answer to the question has to do with how efficient you are. So how much margin you have to spend per ad relative to its performance and the value of each unit that you produce. But that relationship between the cost of each unit of production and the value of each unit of production is something you should track and continue to try to.
Do you think there's any heuristic you'd give somebody there?
in terms of spend 10% of your media.
Yep.
Let's assume that most brands set their ROAS target and drive their overall business to their absolute marginal threshold.
Okay.
I bet that most people don't include creative in that calculation.
Correct.
And so what I would say is that you are going to likely have to begin to include some costs associated with production in order to get to that idea, which is going to alter your ROAS target and to see if you can get there. So I think it probably it
So
depends
you
on.
essentially think that the creative production ought to go under the advertising and marketing portion of your P&L.
I don't think so because it doesn't move in the same linear fashion. Like
Yeah.
it is chunkier as a fixed cost,
Yes. Yeah.
but the relationship ahead, like, so when I think about planning a month, I think about how much spend I'm trying to get to, how many units of production that's required. And it's different every month because I'm bringing with me a different amount of spend each month from my previous month.
Yeah.
But that relationship between the incremental amount of spend and that cost of production has to have some relationship.
Yeah.
It's one of the main reasons why I don't think that creative should be an internal resource. Creative has to be a variable cost in your business in the sense that you have to scale it up and down relative
Yeah.
to necessity.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest mistakes I think people make on OpEx is having in-house creative.
Yeah.
In-house creative makes almost no sense in an e-commerce business.
Yeah. Okay. So do you assign the expected value of an ad of a ad unit, right?
Yep.
We'll call it right. Do you assign that expected value differently relative to some assessment of the quality of the ad? What I mean
No.
is, yeah,
So I think every brand should define a baseline standard that in order for an ad to be considered an ad, it has to achieve the standard. So you don't even get to be an ad unless you've achieved the quality. So if I have to make 100 ads, you, the brand owner, define the gate through which I have to enter into in order to
yeah.
become an ad.
This is your argument against the Post-it note, for example, right? Like
Yeah,
it's like it's just too
it
low
doesn't
of
meet the
quality.
threshold. For me, if I was running a brand, if I was running, well, there are some brands for whom I think the Post-it note makes sense. I think like, and I love Hexclad.
Right.
It grieves my soul to see them run Post-it
Yeah.
note ads. Like,
Yeah.
if I was in charge of the brand, and I have tons of respect, probably crushing whatever, maybe I'm wrong on this, but from a pure brand ethos, and this is very subjective, I think that there are a lot of brands for whom that shouldn't meet the threshold.
Yeah. Okay. So do you assess the potential value of a, let's go extreme here, a 10-minute long ad video, long explainer, problem, agitation, solution, VSL, that kind of thing, right? Do you assess the potential value of that ad versus a well-designed still image
So
differently?
no, this is the problem that I actually don't think there's any predictive value that the long form has any
Yeah.
higher upside.
Well, so long form is a fraught term now in these conversations
Yeah.
because I've used it in a specific way, but I forget that particular thing. What I'm saying is like essentially an ad that is a higher amount of investment. Is there or is the entire game for you keep the investment as low as possible because as long as you meet the threshold that you talked about, like as long as they get through the gate, keep the investment as low as possible and take as many bets as possible because it's so impossible to
That's
break
right.
the
If I was
outcome,
a small brand, I would run almost no video because it's
the
just a
cost.
bet game. It's an expected value calculation that the cost to produce quality static image ads is basically $0. So you can make so many of them.
Yeah.
And I just don't see any proof that any any ad type has a higher expected value
Yeah.
than any other ad type.
Well, stills are almost always retargeting. Taylor, you didn't know that?
Yeah.
The the
Tell the people you're kidding so they don't get
I'm kidding.
okay. Yeah.
I'm kidding. I hear that sometimes, and I think probably in some account somewhere. The That's interesting. I think it's probably still wrong. I still think you're too negative about the ability of different ads to produce different outcomes. I don't think it's about format, by the way. I do think you can do a
So then why
great
is
still
cost
image
the most important variable?
because I think it just depends on the brand some in terms of like what actually communicates their value proposition best. I think there are brands where it's like, the Kayla silicone ring ad, like, black and white, like that product doesn't need a lot of explanation.
Yeah.
The still image does a great job communicating what the value proposition is. And so you don't really need to do, yeah, I could do a long form explainer for that ad, but it's like it's a piece of rubber on your
Yeah.
whatever. So I don't know, maybe it would work better, but I'm not sure. The But what I'm thinking about partly here is like that agrees with you is this is like an Alex Hormozy principle here where he talks about, I think it's in Gym Launch Secrets, he talks about when you're making your ads with this kind of thing, he's like, here's your headline, here's your body copy, here's your da da da.
Yeah.
Now move them around on the ad as many different ways as you possibly can,
Right.
and then just launch all of them because it's so cheap once you've made the first ad to make
That's
a
right.
million more. And there is a principle there that I do agree with, which is like this is part of the here you go creative testing conversation. Is that like instead of iterating off of winners, instead do the testing
That's so
at the
smart.
ad creation level, create 10 versions of the ad
You
because when
actually drop the cost up to do that too.
yeah
The funny thing about iterations is that the highest cost in the creative production process is the human spending the time. It actually
yeah
it often destroys the cost benefit in really wild ways. But
okay, so let's take the AI example.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, do you think that you should go and get on Claude right now? That somebody watching or listening to this, right? Should go and get on Claude right now and get it to spin out a million variations of something, and
Yeah.
then get on another AI tool and just go make all of those. Yeah,
And upload them in the ad account.
yeah,
I think that there's going to be brands that do this that obliterate people at a scale that is hard to imagine, which
yeah,
is they are going to remove all of the legacy human gunk
yeah,
around what has to be true. How many people have to approve an idea?
yeah,
And they're just going to go like if you go into I play with this sometimes where I just go like bamboo earth, like show me make a flat lay of like this and cut and like let's just say I made 500 of them and put them all in the ad account tomorrow. What I know about Bamboo Earth's performance is that there's nothing precious about the way that anything is happening in a way that we should really hold an insane gate
yeah,
to that idea. But the cost of production is actually still really high.
yeah,
Now, the alternative to this is a different path, which is marketing storytelling,
yeah,
which is you want to talk about making video production. I actually say, okay, have something substantive to say.
yeah.
Otherwise, the cost of production is almost entirely wasted.
So I think in some ways, tell me how this does not disagree with all of the content you've been putting out recently about this point, which is like you have said like don't test background colors and things like that, right? Like, you know,
So to be clear, when you say test,
was
testing to me infers the idea that you're attempting to create a
no,
learning.
no, no. I'm using a term way looser than that. I mean, so
I'm all for make 100 ads of
yeah.
random
Okay, great. Great. That's
assortments,
fine.
right?
So, but you've also been a big believer in like push really hard on better marketing moments.
Yes.
But what you think is that that doesn't really happen at the ad level.
No,
The ad is just the last step in communicating that,
that's right.
basically.
That's right.
It all happens before the ad.
That's right. I
So
think
here, okay, let me say something about this. I think that you're probably wrong about the quality versus quantity thing. I'm watching this really closely with a couple different clients right now, and a couple people who are really good.
well,
I
this
have,
isn't quality. I'm still okay with a quality gate.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
okay with that.
well,
You can define that. I'm anti ugly ad.
yeah.
I actually don't think these things are as up that the idea that to get quantity, you have to degrade quality. I think this is a made up idea.
So yeah, I think that might be wrong, but I'll actually withhold that criticism here. I think it's probably wrong.
This is what
That's where I'm at right
manufacturing
now.
is. Think about producing a Tesla, right? Nobody says that in order to make more Teslas, you have to make the Teslas worse. What you solve for is you build an assembly line to uphold a standard of quality. And great innovative people build better assembly lines to produce
Yeah,
large scale amounts of high quality things.
yeah,
It happens all the time.
yeah,
You don't have to always trade those things off.
yeah. Yeah, okay. I see that point. That's fine. I'll give you that point for now because the actual thing I think is more interesting in this conversation in some ways is the notion that more the mistake people are making is actually in some ways just like throw more ads at it. And that what this thing that you've been pushing on recently, I've been thinking about it a lot. It's been a
Yeah.
really helpful thought to me, which is like go make your brand more reach deeper into a person's emotions, essentially, right?
So think of it, yes, I
Like
think
your
you need
born
to
primitive
bifurcate.
example, right? Where it's like
Yeah.
D-Day shoes with this
Yes.
whole thing. It's such a good example. And here's the thing. The like especially for some brands, like there's a thing where you think about how your brand meets a customer's life in a real way, and they have this emotional connection to it. And and what operators ought to think about is like, okay, if you're selling that more than like the cloth of the clothes or whatever, right? You're selling the way your brand connects to this person's values and emotions and stuff like that. How do I, as a brand, go get deeper into that place?
Yep.
And what do I do to do that? And I think that question is worthy of much more reflection for much more brand owners. So much that I don't care to argue with you about this point because I think even if you're wrong, if people actually focused all their attention on the thing you're saying, it would really help brands.
I just think that you should really broaden the spectrum or like move into poles here, which is that if it's just an attempt for pure ad performance, that all of the thinking about how we're going to make a better thing here is really minimally impactful. Like this ad format versus that ad format, this font versus this, like this is where all the energy and waste happens. And the variation in outcome is so small between the things, it's unpredictable and nobody actually knows it. Now,
Completely agree. If you're framing it on format, something like that, I completely agree. I think this is all about messaging, and
yeah,
it's about communicating ideas. That's what I think.
yeah. And there are probably people who are that, but the vast majority of people are the same at it.
I
Meaning,
agree. I agree with that too.
like if you pulled all the creative strategists off of Twitter and you gave them bamboo earth, like they would produce roughly the same outcome.
Yeah, I think
That's
that's
my
probably
opinion.
right.
And so the alternative is let them all do whatever they want and do it as cheap as possible and hold them to massive creative cost constraints. And then on the other side, go build an amazing story about an amazing new product, an amazing thing, and spend all of your energy and money on that, but don't spend it trying to come up a bunch of different versions, like time and energy and video cuts of cactus exploding or something.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is where some of the iteration stuff conversation goes really wrong, which is like, and where I think brands need to get better, which is like, it is about when I analyze creative for brands right now. What I try to do is I don't I actually don't break down ads into their component parts. I think instead about like how is this brand communicating its ideas and which of those ads seem to be resonating with people. And I just make a hypothesis. It's not very scientific, but I just go like using the instincts I can, looking at the ads that I'm looking at, what ads are resonating with people. And my assumption is that is primarily not about still versus video or anything like that, or about length or about camera quality or about any of the things that people want to put that on, you know?
Yep.
What I instead think it is about how good of a job do you do actually communicating the messaging of your brand relative to the customer's life. That's
Yeah.
it.
I just think that like the percentage of ads that I see anybody like I could you give me an example maybe of what you're talking about? Like, because if we took everybody's favorite creative strategists on Twitter
Twitter.
and just
Yeah.
said like, could you just show me like I'm pulling up foreplay right here, just
Yeah.
like as a way to look at a bunch of ads. Like,
I'll give you one. I'll give you an example right now. I think we may be able to show this ad later too. Right. I'm working with a fruit farm in San Diego.
okay,
And what I have come to learn is that there's a subset of customers who love farmers market quality fruit. They think of farmers market quality fruit as being better than grocery store fruit.
yeah,
It probably mostly is actually,
yep,
for all kinds of reasons, and they like the taste of it. And so you can show fruit and say this fruit is good, eat it. But the actual messaging that has to matter, and there's a million formats that you could use for this.
yeah,
But the messaging that matters the most is to explain to people as clearly as possible and as compellingly as possible. This fruit was grown on a farm and it is better than the fruit that you get from the grocery store. That is the idea in somewhere in the brand. That's why actually the brand exists, right? They created a farm in the US to deliver that to people. There's people
hmm
who like the taste of really good fruit. And so that's not a no, there's probably some layer deeper where that gets into their emotional life or whatever.
So okay,
That's
so
not the
but let me
most story driven version of it. If you wanted to, you could go into farms as a story and some of those kinds of things. But what I am saying is like the thing that will make ads work for that brand is being at least for that particular subset of customers. There's probably some other things too. There's like
okay.
a gift customer and some of that kind of stuff, right? But like is to be able to communicate that in as clear and as compelling as way possible.
So, but let me ask you something in terms of how to do that. What's it called? What's
Good Hill Farms.
good? Like if we took the about page for Good Hill Farms, because like I like this point that you made that like the brand exists for a specific reason and
Yeah.
has a specific story,
Yes.
and we fed it to Chat GPT and we gave it the prompt that you just described, which
Yeah.
is right with immense clarity and
Yeah.
specificity, write 400 headlines that communicate about the unique
Yeah.
value proposition of Good Hill Farms. Do you think you're going to outright? And who like amidst the 400, do you not think that there's clarity somewhere in a way that could then be automatically translated into headline copy, image on ad, take all these images, put them onto things, and like how is that not the inevitable end conclusion, even if all you introduce to the AI is the
Well,
principle?
yeah. So first of all, I think that principle requires some arriving at.
Right, but
Uh,
you've got it. So
yeah. But I think that's actually the hard work. I think the hard work. I mean, in this case, it's maybe not, but I think it's hard. I think there's more hard work in seeing what it is that people care about your product than that a lot of people let on. And this is actually where I see a lot of AI driven ads go bad so far in my experience is that they don't actually connect to the thing that people care about. So they do a really good job describing the product, but they don't actually, and particularly at the hook level. And I want to preface this like this is a really active area of exploration for me right now.
Yeah.
I'm not telling anybody don't use AI. The opposite. I'm playing with it with some clients. I have one client who's very AI forward. He's awesome at it. He is doing the thing you're doing, and he's writing these long form emails related to the value of his product that like smash for him, and he's doing it in Claude in 3 seconds, and it's incredible. So it's I'm probably gonna do an interview with him at some point. But the thing I haven't seen AI do yet, and I actually was gonna have a topic today. With the topic was gonna be I'm sleeping on AI, which is like me personally. Like I'm realizing this that I'm probably slow to it. But is that like I haven't seen it like analyze I haven't seen it arrive at the true value proposition and front load that into a hook that's actually compelling and works yet. I haven't seen it. I bet it will happen, but I haven't seen it yet be able to generate those hooks. Now, if you could do 400, I think Chat, you're using ChatGPT right now. I think ChatGPT is a lot worse than Claude too, by the way. So I think Claude does a better job, but as a writer, but I think that like the hooks that so far I have seen from AI driven ads don't do a very good job of capturing people's attention.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I
Maybe if
don't
you could
I
spin
mean,
to 50, you just made
I
50.
just don't think that there's any math that validates that experience, and I
Yeah.
just I don't I don't think that if you took a human and you had them write 50 headlines, that they would outperform the 50 headlines here on a consistent, repeatable basis.
Yeah.
I think you'd get probably random results, but the cost of this is 0 and the cost of you is high.
Yeah.
And so the problem
Well,
is,
yeah, the human would write 10, 5 to 10,
well,
right? They
the
wouldn't
amount
write
of the
50.
cost of you for me to get a human to replicate what I just did, which is like did this, I copied the about
Yeah.
page into
Right.
is so it's so incomparable
Yes. Right.
that you cannot possibly outperform it at the scale of your cost.
Yeah.
So even if you're cheap, like, but the problem is creative strategists aren't
They're
cheap.
not cheap.
They're actually wildly expensive to the tune of like $100 an hour.
Do you sorry, go ahead.
Imagine that cost, right? If they could, however many headlines they could write in $100 of hour of cost, I could probably 5,000x their production, maybe infinitely outproduce their
Right.
production.
Right.
So there's just
Can you
there's
actually get those into the ad account and all
yeah
that for the same cost?
yes
Like, can you this is what I was gonna ask. Can
actually
you
way faster because again the creative strategist doesn't even get them into the ad account. They get turned into a spreadsheet that a media buyer then goes and uploads. That entire
Yeah.
process can be completely
Yeah.
absolved.
Yeah. Yeah. But there is some point at which the cost of turning 50 headlines into ads does add up versus turning 5 headlines into ads. Like theoretically, if somebody could write 5 better ones, then let's say of this 50, 5 of them work, right? Like you have to then go create the 50 ads.
Who
And
does? What do you mean?
well, like at some point, those headlines that you're writing have to make it onto still images or whatever,
Yeah, but
like,
that all happens automatically.
yeah. So that's part of my question. And then I'll just, somebody has to like go add them to the ad account and build the ads. Uh,
You can API upload directly into Meta
yeah,
from a spreadsheet.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
So that's what's the thing about this, and really Meta's building the AI,
Yeah, so that
Gen
this is
AI
this
stuff, right? Like
right. This is what's actually gonna happen. It's
this is
all
why
gonna move
Mark
into
Zuckerberg
Ads
is
Manager.
saying all you're in his latest earnings call is saying all you're going to do is give me your business.
Yeah.
That's the only thing the human at the end of the day is going to
Yeah.
actually be
Yeah.
responsible for. Now you're going to have probably some sort of creative constraints here, but again, for the sake of this kind of creative work, you have no chance. There's no chance to outperform this mechanism. Now, again, the bigger story about what ChatGPT doesn't control is what Good Hill Farms plants on their farm,
That's right.
what
Yeah.
products they make, whether they're
Right.
actually good or not.
Right.
Who is this
Yeah.
person and
Yeah.
why do I care about her? I'm looking at
Right.
one of the founders
Sure.
or something. What do they do with their money? Do they care for people? Do they go reinvest in other local farms?
Yeah.
Do they actually build inherent in their story
And
something that matters?
this point I think is the point you've been hammering recently in a lot of these conversations that I think is extremely helpful and different than what a lot of people are saying about this. And I think I just like would just double down on that. I think like there is a thing where you have to think more deeply about that connection point between your actual brand and your customer, and that is actually really hard for AI to do, right? To be that creative and unique and thoughtful about these really deep connections.
And they're just not going to, that's not going to proactively do it for you. It
Yeah,
may be able to suggest to you
totally,
ideas about what you could do.
totally.
But again, to decide what you plant on your farm at this point, it's not.
Okay, let me ask you another question.
Yep.
You have been tweeting recently
Yep.
about something, and I've noticed that you've been tweeting about it.
Mhm.
And I know how your brain works. And so what I have noticed about this thing is that there is a reason you're tweeting about it and
Yeah.
that you have seen something somewhere that is making you interested in it. And that is a discussion point that actually not that long ago, in some ways, I would have assumed you would have rejected.
Yeah.
And that is the conversation around incrementality.
Yes.
So I just want to ask you about that. Why are you interested in this right now? What are your first of all, let me ask, what compelled you to do this? What data did you see somewhere that made you go, I need to tell the world about incrementality and how they're all wasting their money?
A few things. One is there's a massive market demand for it. Everybody wants it.
Yep.
So that's just like a market tactic thing that candidly it was like, we're going to play in this space. Everybody's demanding it. We're going to come up with a solution for it. Two, almost every incrementality result reinforces our position. And so it
Yeah.
gives my methodology more leverage.
What is that?
Is
I mean,
that
I know what it
that
is, but tell
Meta
the
is the
people.
most powerful incremental channel, that PMAX is really destructive in a lot of ways, that branded search is limiting, that view conversions are challenging, like all of the things that are in terms of where we move people.
These are all
Uh,
things that I have agreed with you about for a long
yeah.
time.
And
Yeah.
so incrementality studies, which like Google in their Geo2X, like which is their incrementality, like conversion lift study that they run, has this whole thing where I think we should put in the show notes the actual research paper that Google has published about geo-matching holdout and their methodology. I think it's a good read for anybody who's interested in this topic. But they call it the gold standard of experiments. You'll hear this language a lot, which is that this is the most scientific way to evaluate causal impact of advertising. And so in that sense, like I think that we should try to always hold the highest standard to obligating ourselves to making sure that our ads are actually causing incremental impact for the business. Like we want that. We all want that, I think. And this is the best standard for upholding that. So that's like the next thing. The other thing I would say is that it kills attribution softwares, because what I watch in business is that it's the third data point that destroys everything. What is the third data point? If data point one is your business, the actual revenue on your site, let's call it new customer revenue for the sake of that's like the core metric.
Yep.
The second metric is the in platform
Yep.
number. It's the third number, the MTA number, that causes this triangulation that causes immense confusion.
Yep.
And what incrementality does is it builds a relational bridge between the platform reported number and the number so that I can use the platform data and set my cost controls accordingly.
Doesn't attribution do the same thing? Build a
No,
bridge between the two?
no,
Why not?
because it does not give me a relationship between new customer revenue and the platform reported number. It gives me a third.
So maybe I've heard you talk about this before, but maybe re-explain the difference between attribution and incrementality.
Attribution is an attempt to assign value to a stage of the funnel or to different ad platforms based on, well, let me take a step back. Attribution is just simply a method for assigning value to advertising channels or
Yeah.
advertising efforts. There are a million types of attribution models. I was starting to slip into MTA, multi-touch attribution, where you're attempting to assign partial value to multiple touch points across the spectrum. um, Incrementality, or what attribution doesn't attempt to do, is to ask the question of, would there have been the impact had the ads not existed at all? So it's not an attempt at understanding the causal relationship. It's closer to a corollary relationship. It's saying these ads occurred and there was clearly an interaction. There was a click, there was a view, there was some action across the spectrum, but it doesn't isolate or specifically create a holdout to answer the question of what would have occurred had the ads not existed at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So let's say maybe frame up an example for people for incrementality. So if there's let's say I have a 2-to-1 ROAS in Facebook ads dashboard, right?
Yes,
What would an incrementality number be that
that's
would
right.
and what would it tell me?
That's right. So it's going to give you the actual incremental revenue in comparison to the total reported revenue.
Right. So if I spent $100,000, then the total reported revenue is $200,000. The incremental revenue, what number will it, I have actually never used incrementality software.
If
What
it
number will it spit out?
Well, so there's different so
Right.
let's say like a meta conversion list study is going to tell you of the $400,000 of what did we say?
200,
Of
200.
the $200,000 of reported revenue, only 50,000 of it was actually incremental,
Right.
and
So you would have
150.
gotten the 150 anyway. So you spent $100,000 to get 50.
So now your actual IROAS is the
Yes.
term would be 50,000
Yeah. So it's a point
over
5.
your spend,
Yeah.
point 0.5 exactly,
Okay.
instead of the 2. So
Whoops.
now what yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but now what you can do is you can assume that the people what they do is they take a weighted factoring
Yeah.
to their meta reported number
Yeah.
Or you could set your cost control. Let's say you wanted a 1x, you would set your cost control at a 4x.
Right. Right.
Right? Same thing with PMAX. So
Right.
it actually gives you the relationship that you can now understand how to set your cost control.
Yeah. So you said this all ultimately reinforces for you. Meta is really incremental. PMAX
Well,
is a
so I don't
disaster.
know. Did you see this video that I did?
No, I did not
So,
watch it.
so
I saw that you
the,
said it.
the idea is that if you think about incrementality as existing on two axes, on the x-axis is your optimization setting, and then on the y-axis is your exclusion or your targeting. And so, the more that you obligate, I call it a physical action, an actual click, and you measure it in a short window, and the tighter your exclusions are, the more incremental the ad spend is.
Yeah.
Right. So the worst example, like I call it the most criminal ad product of all time, is display remarketing on a 28-day click, 28-day view measurement.
Yeah. Right.
It's basically not
ad,
incremental at all.
ad roll.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the old.
Criteo, ad
Yeah.
roll,
Right.
etc. So that's like the least incremental thing because
Yeah.
it's just literally a display ad that someone happens to see and you
They
measure their
didn't
view
even
on a
look at it.
28-day
Right.
window.
Yeah.
It's
They didn't.
insane. Right.
Yeah.
Versus the most incremental, which I mean this relatively incremental, is that if you run a 1-day click with the tightest possible exclusions, if you actually are able to generate revenue, you are likely the platform is going to underreport
Yeah.
the actual
Yeah.
impact.
Right.
So in those cases, we see like when we run 7-day click or 1-day click in Meta, we actually see incremental factors that will increase the ROAS.
Yeah, I remember you said this in your podcast in a way that actually interested me. I believe you said that some of the readings you were saying is that the actual closest reading to the true value sometimes was 28-day click plus 1-day view.
Yeah.
So that essentially that was like mostly all incremental.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that you oftentimes, so 7-day click, the thing I put in my tweet was that if I was running 7-day click on an incrementality basis, I would by default use like a 25% increase to the ROAS
Yeah.
as the actual incremental impact just on .com. Forget if you add Amazon or
Yeah,
anything
right.
else. And when we run incrementality studies, we see it as high as 250%. That the actual incremental ROAS is 2.5 times the platform reported number. There's this giant trope that people think Meta over-reports, and it massively underreports.
Yeah, I've thought this for a long time. It's really crazy. So you're saying even on a 28-day click basis.
On a 7-day click
Okay,
basis.
yeah. Well, so I've
use a lot of
28-day click forever. Yeah.
Yep.
And I have basically done what you suggest, what you're saying here, which is that I actually build my bid caps, my TROS targets, or cost caps, as the case may be. I build them with an adjustment for a purchase multiplier.
Yeah.
That is basically assuming the 28-day click is right.
Incrementality validates. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're just giving exactly what we want an actual answer for.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, before we were talking, you said, "Hey, have you been thinking about incrementality?" To me, you said that to me. Like, so what? I mean, what are the other big takeaways here? Like, give me the.
Well, so I think that one, just understanding like, so House is one of the players in the space. Measured as our close preferred partner. House just raised $20 million. Like I say that as a way to give you the sense of demand. Now, my honest belief is that the cost of this is going to $0. I have heard that it's on Shopify's roadmap to offer geo holdout testing using their data. Meta already offers conversion lift studies for free. Google is now offering conversion lift studies for free. There's no reason that you should be paying $10,000 a month to get incrementality testing. You can get access to it for way cheaper than that. And it's not a business, it's a feature. It's a math equation that can actually be done fairly easily. So people can get access to this for cheaper for sure, but it is happening everywhere and it is becoming the primary starting point to determine target setting in channels for brands that are ruthlessly committed to making sure that they can drive incremental contribution dollars.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think part of the reason I haven't paid that much attention to it is because I tend to work with smaller brands that have less total channels. So
it's a little easier.
It's really easy, right? You just look at Meta ads relative to new customer revenue, and it's pretty clear what's driving the value.
And what I'll say is like 7-day click, if you're using a 1-2 factoring or whatever already, like you're going to be really close.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if anything, the only thing I think it might be a reason to validate is you might be under.
I have at least one client for whom I've thought about this for, and maybe a couple. So yeah, I think that's
so this, I'm going to show you something so you can look at this. You can describe what you're seeing. So this is how Measured reports. You'll see
brand,
the tactic, the media spend,
percent incrementality, measure Facebook prospecting 127%, Google PMAX 42%.
That's right.
Yeah.
And look at some of these Advantage Plus campaigns. So this is the actual IROS versus what Meta's reporting.
Yeah.
So you can see that, like, the reason I think it's important is that if you were running this, the client might be meh, but if it's actually that, that's scale to the
That's
moon,
right.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you can repeatedly see how bad, like,
Yeah.
everything else
Yeah.
is that, like, it is just universally the case that every channel that we run this for, and you can get this for
This is exactly but this yeah. This is exactly what everybody has been suspicious of for a long time, right? Well, I mean, at least maybe I'm saying everybody. This is what I've been suspicious of for a long time. It's the reason why so let me ask you another question. What happens when you do this for forget Google because everybody already hates PMAX, right? Although it seems like we should hate it more from some of the data that you've been putting out.
yeah,
Which by the way, yeah, anyway. What about when you do this for like TikTok or something, TikTok ads?
yeah, so same thing. TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, it's all garbage.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the thing.
Are you how sure this is right?
I mean, again,
What's your
what's
confidence
right?
level in the math here?
The challenge, so let's just talk a little bit about how it happens. They go through and they model geographic regions that are indicative. There's two ways to do this. I'm gonna talk about measured for a second, or they, and you go into your ad account and you exclude those
Yeah.
DMAs, states
Yeah.
from your allocation.
Yeah, okay. And you see what revenue that yeah.
That's right. And they model the revenue before and after.
Yeah.
So they have a predicted amount of revenue and they have a synthetic spend prediction, and they can tell you what happened as a result. They back test it to see how accurate it is. Obviously, the more data you have, the more consistent behavioral set. There's all sorts of ways to introduce error into that kind of problem. Now, Meta's is even a conversion lift study on Meta is even better because they can actually truly hold out customer demos. They don't
Yeah.
have to depend on state
Yeah.
isolations,
Yeah.
etc. They can literally create a holdout cell and do it even more accurately. And then Google has their methodology goes even further, which is that their regions, they find like regions
Hmm.
where the
Nice.
shopping
Yeah.
behavior is actually similar between city A and city
Yeah,
B.
right.
And then they create the holdout that way. So it's a little bit more advanced in terms of the selection process.
Yeah.
So how certain am I that it's
Yeah.
right?
Certain enough.
As certain as any other information that I
Yeah,
have to make
right.
a decision.
What about have you run this with any non-conversion optimized, Facebook ads?
Yeah. Hey,
What's the takeaway on that?
brutal.
Brutal.
So you can see here's some Facebook awareness. There's
Yeah.
your media send. There's your incremental impact. It's zero. There's literally nothing.
Yeah. Right.
So this is a big way. Like, and right now,
TikTok prospecting, 0.
like,
Same as Facebook awareness.
it like literally $230. Like it's
Yeah,
just
right.
it's amazing to me. This is and what I appreciate about Meta, and this is a shout out to Meta versus Google. Is Meta is actually totally willing to grade their own homework right now,
Yes,
and
right.
I've seen their conversion lift studies show that their accounts are a disaster.
Yeah.
And they own it. They go through it. Google is really hesitant to do this because they know their ad products are real trouble with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're actually being forced into it now.
Have you done Twitter
Yeah, so there's Twitter is on here,
on this
I
one?
think,
Okay,
actually.
yeah, I'm curious because I've heard some little bits of chatter that
It's like 65%, I think.
that's pretty decent.
Yeah, and here's the thing. It's really
You can
important.
still make it work, right?
Yes.
Right, because
It
it
doesn't
just
mean there's no incremental
right,
impact. It just
right,
means you need to adjust your target
right,
accordingly.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay, yeah, this one was 62% for the Twitter
Yeah,
right
it's
there.
not
Yeah,
bad.
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, because if you're getting a 3-to-1 and you get 62% of that, that's enough, probably.
That's right. Exactly. So here's any of these channels have incremental impact. The question is just what does that mean? You need this.
Relative to what they say in the dashboard.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's the thing that everybody's been looking for so long. And that's why they went to attribution tools and all this, all that kind of stuff. But this is just, yeah, it's interesting.
Because the key for me is I need to understand where to set my cost control. And so
Right.
what attribution,
Yeah, I'm with
attribution
you.
doesn't answer that question for me. This answers that question because it gives me a relationship to the platform reported number. So that's why I find it more.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. Okay. What's next? That's good. Anything else you want to say about incrementality?
No, no. I
What-
think
I mean, your
that's-
PMAX thing is interesting. If it's in general, if it's actually 33%.
it is.
I sent that to a client who's running a bunch of PMAX and was like, hey, and then I think somebody brought up in the responses to that, what if you're already excluding branded search? And then you said 50%.
Yeah.
So it's like still
yeah, very problematic.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to
I've kind of
do-
wondered for a long time if I was undervaluing Google.
It's because Google's default attribution model is 33-1. And when you use PMAX, you introduce display, YouTube,
Yeah.
and other things.
Yeah.
So if you got to feed only
let's argue
brand
about this.
excluded,
Let's argue about
etc.
this. Why?
Okay.
So, I mean, because display remarketing, you said is the famous.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
right.
terrible.
Yeah. So why? I mean, if PMAX is going to have that. Oh, you said you're going to go to feed only.
No, I'm saying that's why it's poorly incremental, even when you exclude brand terms, is
Oh,
because the attribution
yeah.
model is 33-1.
So why not go back and assume, I just think a Google search click or a Google search term, right? Let's say leggings, okay? Categorical term, so
Yep.
non-branded,
Yep.
okay, is real different than a YouTube ad, let's say, because a YouTube ad is attempting to create demand. I mean, create demand, quote unquote. You know what I mean?
It depends
It's
on who you're
but
targeting.
it's outbound relative to inbound. The in it's and so those are so different that even the
Maybe
idea of
unless it's being showed on a website visitor.
yeah, well, exclude those, right?
But
So
again,
make it
so again,
prospecting, tight
follow the
exclusions,
y-axis. Yeah.
right?
So any
So
ad,
so my point is like,
but it
why
won't be
blend them
efficient.
together at all? Why
Well,
why why not separate? Why not run the incremental study separately? Because maybe standard shopping and maybe YouTube and display remarketing and search all have different incremental values, right? And so why blend them all together into PMAX in the first place?
well, the
Why
reason
not separate them?
to me it's the same thing as, and this is where I think we had this text exchange where I think it's the same reason you don't isolate IG feed versus IG stories or anything else is because I actually think that the primary value with advertising is reaching a specific user wherever they are. I actually think the incremental value is often the customer more than it is the placement. And so the value, what you don't want to do is constrain access to a person because the person, when in market, is what you're trying to reach wherever they're at more than it is about the specific trying to get more people who are on YouTube.
So then the non-incremental aspects of those channels then are because the channel is incapable of do
Generating clicks.
of doing the thing that Meta is the best at and has been the best at for a long time, which is putting the right ad in front of the right person.
I don't actually think that's the problem. I think it's that the people don't click.
Okay. So, but then I mean that's really different for again standard shopping versus YouTube. People click on standard shopping
Yeah, for
ads.
sure. I think standard shopping's great.
So why combine them up at all? Why not separate them out and run the incrementality test separate? That's what I'm saying.
I
Why bother with PMAX is really what I'm saying. What's
I
the
think the idea
point
would be
of
that
mashing
PMAX
them?
has more volume, right?
Yeah.
Is that
But
the
do
theory?
you want that?
If I
If
know
you
the
get
incremental factor and I can set my target, my T ROAS in the PMAX relative to the incremental factor, then my assumption would be I could get more volume. That it's the same thing as Yoni's argument
yeah.
that you should run 7-day one day view, but set a target higher
Yeah, right.
than running just 7-day
Right.
click. It's just the idea that I could get more potential volume in that way.
Within a blended average, and you're willing to have some non-incremental display remarketing mixed in there because the net result is still more efficient volume total.
As long as I know the incrementality factor of that campaign and the
Right.
distribution doesn't
Right.
suddenly change. Now, the challenge with incrementality tests, is that they are a historical result,
Right.
not a
Right.
predictive result.
So if the
If
yeah,
the
if you ramp up your budget on PMAX and suddenly it just gives you a bunch more display remarketing, your incremental factor changes.
could be problematic.
I think this is a really good argument for split out.
Yeah.
Like
And
I mean all I hear when you see this is like unless there is so much more volume with PMAX, it just feels like
I don't have a problem if standard shopping is where people want to live in Google. I think it's their best ad product. I think it's probably the safest way to play the game. So you are obviously, you got a big sponsor here for this pod. We're
yes,
big fans of them. More staffing
more staffing.
out in the Philippines, correct?
Morestaffing.co/AF. Go visit it right now. I've hired my team through them.
Yeah. So you have 100 employees through more staffing, and there is a growing trend. We just launched this past month something called the CTC Global Accelerator, which is a service dedicated exclusively to providing seven-figure brands support through international labor.
You found literally the best employee in the world, though.
Literally.
I mean, people don't know. You're tweeting about this, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, you're just promoting your product." Like I'll tell you really honestly. I talked to one client of mine and told them, "I think it's possible you should leave me and go to this program because this person is so good,
Yeah.
and that the economics will work better for
Well,
your business."
yeah, and the price of it, no one can beat this price. So it's $5,000 and you get basically our full growth service. But it's because we have outsourced international labor led by a young man in India named Joy. And
Joy did 2 coaching calls with me. I think probably because you told him to, is my
no,
guess.
he just does that.
Well, okay,
If
I
I
thought you
talked well about you, he would
right.
go
Okay. And
solve
then he
that.
was like, "Okay, thanks. I think we're good." And he said something like this, and I was talking to him on these calls and just like he wasn't giving me a lot of response, but what I could read,
Yeah.
he was going like, "You idiot. I already know all of
Yeah,
this."
yeah. He's
Like
like,
what
I've absorbed you. Okay, I've
yeah,
moved on. Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah. I could just tell he just wasn't that interested in the content. And I needed some feedback. Like tell me, do you need me to go to a different place here? Like
Yeah.
whatever. But I just think he was like, no, I'm smarter than you. I don't need
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
So, and we have, and this is we have 50 leads this month that we can only take 5. And the demand is just insane for this. It's what brands need more than anything is cheap quality service at that size of business. So, but the point is the reason we're going to suffocate every small US agency in the world is because you can't small US agency with US full-time labor make money at the price that I can offer and make money because international labor is so good and so cheap. And this is a problem for US labor generally. And the point of this topic was that you're all in on hiring this way.
Yeah.
We're watching this happen all the time. I'm looking at this going, these employees might actually swallow my CTC business at some point because they're so talented and the quality of applicant is so high. And this trope that this is like VAs doing busy work is so wrong. And it's a huge threat to domestic labor. And Bill D'Alessandro, who's a
Yeah.
client of yours and a
Yeah. Friend
friend,
of both of us.
he sent me a message when we were talking about this on Twitter the other day. And he said basically, like, I think this is the biggest macroeconomic narrative in the United States in the future. And I'm trying everything I can to find some way to make a financial bet on what happens to markets when all the US labor basically collapses
Yeah.
because outsource is
Well,
cheaper and more effective.
Maytab, in my interview with him the other day, he said Canadians are 30% cheaper than the US. Like,
That's
you
right.
don't even have to think about this as like Philippines or Latin America or
That's
whatever
right.
it is. Like, the UK is
That's
like
right.
meaningfully cheap, So yeah, it's a really big deal. I mean, to the point about quality, this is the thing I try to say in my ad reads for more staffing all the time is like, and I've had Greg Carry on, who was the guy who Greg founded more staffing with their CEO Laura out of his e-commerce business because he said it was like for him as an operator when like I did an episode, you should go listen. It's sponsored, so like very it's lower listen count than my other stuff, but like it's a very good interview. He talked about like for him when he went and did this, he found that like a light bulb went off and suddenly like all of these things that he was thinking about like were free from his brain. And I've talked to Laura from More Staffing and one of her business partners, Glyza, right? Like what I can tell you is like they are the two smartest supply chain people I've come across on all of
That's right.
e-commerce.
That's
They
right.
are so good. It is
Yeah.
stupid. They're so good. And so yeah. So I think it's interesting. I mean, do you want to go towards the how to make money off of this, or do you want to go
Well,
towards the what's going to happen to the U.S. labor market? Because one thing I wonder is if the counter to that is if you and I are so plugged into this world of this kind of thing that it isn't catching on quite as broadly. But I don't know.
but
Markets do a
how do
good
you
job
how,
of
then think
yeah,
about
support
like
shepherd, right? Yeah,
exactly like
yeah,
how many businesses like that are there?
a lot.
Like Jesse Pujji created one. You've
Yeah,
got more stat. Like
yeah,
there's like 100 of them
yeah, yeah,
that are growing really, really fast.
yeah.
And it's like this. So this is the most recent, the newest employee for the CDC Global Accelerator is Nikev, and he's from Trinidad and Tobago, and he
Uh-huh.
has a master's in statistics and has been running credit risk at a bank. Like his like versus a US media buyer, and they're
Imagine me versus him working through a
well,
spread
I
working through
just
a spreadsheet.
exactly, and this
It's
is
not even
but
close.
and then you add in the price cost of an entry level US media buyer relative to this, and the delta is so wide that I don't think this is what people are ready for. Is that
Yeah.
the discrepancy is so dramatic that it's kind of crazy to think about not sourcing. It's just the problem is it's still cumbersome. It's hard to the networks aren't really very developed. So as that continues to mature and get solved and more countries get unlocked and more people realize that they can make money this way.
I know. Here's the bet I would make right now.
Okay, let's hear it.
Start an e-commerce business
Yeah.
and staff the whole thing.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
It's
That's
like this is the thing we talk about all the
labor
time, right?
leverage.
Yeah, right.
Or you know where there's more labor leverage than where
Yeah,
this
right.
specific
Services. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I actually one of the things I've thought about doing is that I've thought about making a massive financial bet on publicly traded service businesses because I think that there
They're all
are
gonna go do this and
between
they're
AI
gonna
and
yeah,
outsourced labor
they're
leverage,
gonna all
nobody
generate
benefits more than the company who all their
is
cost
people.
is people.
That's
And I think
super interesting.
I've watched my margin double in
Yeah.
14 months, like
Right.
in a way that is just it's hard to understand how
That's
much more.
that is the most compelling thing you've told me about why I should push into agency.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
margin opportunity related to those things that I'm
And you
not
have the
thinking about.
relationship
Yeah.
already here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 That's super interesting. I mean, yeah.
The question is more staffing, is their talent e-commerce related though?
It's I don't I mean, I always tell I mean, I have designers and editors there. I think,
Okay.
like, I haven't tried to hire them for media buyers and email people or anything like that. I think but I think this is actually one of the things that I think is sort of silly that, like, that people do is they'll be like, I don't know, are there good, like, email people there? Was like the Philippines is like 150,000,000
Right, right,
people,
right,
right?
right,
Like, what
right.
do you mean, are there good yes, they are there somewhere. Like,
Yep.
like, how do you evaluate that? You get their resumes and then you interview them the same way you would with a US employee. Why would you just write off on the front end the idea that, like, there's nobody in the Philippines
Right, right.
who can do email well? Like, it just seems crazy to me. So what I know for sure about more staffing, at least, is that they have particular expertise in supply chain. Part of that is
That's right.
geographic.
Yeah.
It's because it's a puddle jump to China
Yep.
from the Philippines.
Yep.
So it just, there's like a geographic advantage to that, to where
Yep.
they can get in and out of
Well,
China very fast and quickly and get to major manufacturing areas and go meet manufacturers and hang out with them. And so like, I think especially on that side of the business, yeah, it's a no brainer.
yeah, that's like I was listening to on the operators podcast for somebody who's talking about China and how like of the world's like tooling experts, like there's like 100 of them that are like the absolute pinnacle level relative to the amount that exists in the United States, just because that's the concentration of
Yeah.
skill there.
Right.
So what's happening though is like, so that's sort of like the Philippines thing, right?
Right.
Which is like, if all of a sudden all these outsourced labor are going into a specific sector, does skill bubble up there in a way that, like in
Yeah.
the way that it
And
seems like
that's probably real.
like
Yeah.
Israel software development for
That's
e-commerce.
right.
Suddenly
That's
there's
right.
all these people there that
Right.
they build these companies and then the skill spills
Yeah.
over. And so it's
Yeah.
really interesting to think about like
Yeah.
the downstream consequence. Like one of the things I've thought we actually, I don't know, do you run any ads to the Philippines for any brands?
Uh-uh.
It's like $1.25 CPMs,
Yeah.
8-cent
Right.
clicks. Like if there's any development to the actual e-commerce infrastructure there, it's
Selling
like,
there.
yeah, it's kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And that's like an interesting thing is they get more connected into the US markets
Yeah.
in
This
interesting
is
ways.
like the other thing about this is, like, I just, like, sort of love it in one sense, because it's like it creates opportunity in these places for people in a way that is, like, so financially beneficial to them,
Yeah.
that I think is, like,
Well, if you're into globalization
awesome.
and not a nationalist.
Well, I am. So
That's
if
interesting.
you wanna talk about that, we can.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah,
didn't know that about you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't begin to understand all of the complexities of that conversation, but
Yeah.
I have a I like all people.
Mm,
So, yeah, that's yeah,
cool.
there you go. What about do you disagree with that?
No, no, yeah, no, big global elitist. That's no. I'm a big fan of globalization. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think I remember Mike Beckham talking about at Simple Modern, just like when they built a manufacturing facility in Oklahoma City, he was just talking about like how much of a pain it was to sort of get the tools he needed or something fixed or whatever, because there just is no infrastructure. They're in
Yeah.
the same way, and so there is this thing, and I wonder if there is an element where you want to tap into different pockets of like, go get your supply chain people in the Philippines, and then go get your, whatever. If you could go find sort of what those different places and people are because of all those things. And yeah, I mean, I have found that there's some interesting things that people sort of can undervalue with that. Like cultural distinction does matter, and the way people relate to one another. I heard a really interesting comment from one of the folks at More Staffing. Actually, she lives in Colorado now, and she and I were having lunch together. She said, the thing you got to remember is that we are a colonized and conquered people for a really long time. So that still is in there a little bit, and it's sort of ingrained that we say yes to the person above us.
Interesting.
And so you have to really work hard and really make it explicit that you want us to go outside of the directions, or whatever. But she's like, people will. They're smart, talented,
Yeah.
creative people, just like anywhere else. And that kind of stuff, I think, is one of the challenges with global hiring. Is like it's very hard to be attentive to cultural values like that, and to sort of see them happening in front of you, and to figure out why people aren't doing that. But look, cultural values are hard in America too,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the case that it's only there. This is a good business bridge. Talk about Driveline, because
Yeah,
that's
I'm actually like this is I owe you a big thanks for this. This is like a cool experience I'm getting to have that's really a byproduct
okay. Go
of
ahead.
you. So you obviously worked with
No,
Drive what?
tell me
Oh,
things.
yeah, yeah. So thank you. Thank you for building a relationship with Mike and the team at Driveline.
Yeah.
You want to explain to people what Driveline is real fast?
Yes,
You'll do it better than
if you
me.
really want to get to know Driveline, you should go back and listen to my interview with Driveline with Mike Rathwell, the CEO of Driveline Baseball. As I said to you last time, we talked about them a little bit last time. One of the most interesting businesses in the world, I
Yeah.
think. It is not too much to say. They revolutionized not only baseball, but all of pro sports.
Yep.
And the revolution is still happening to some degree, but it is mostly, at least in medias res, right? It's like it's happening. It is happening for real across there. And it's because they revolutionized the way baseball players get trained by bringing huge amounts of measurability to training. Anybody who's played sports knows this feeling, right? A coach tells you to go do a thing, and you listen to what the coach says because the coach told you to do it. And theoretically, that's going to make you better at the sport or the thing, right? The problem is, what happens when the next coach tells you something different?
Right.
And how do you know the coach's advice is right or whatever it is, right? So what they did is they brought measurability to training and really applied the idea of deliberate practice which is a well-studied thing, to baseball and to baseball training. And then they also applied some really specific practice tactics, basically, to baseball. And the result is a really fascinating services business. They actually are a hybrid service, e-commerce, software business. They have all three. And it's a really, really cool thing. And you and I both knew Driveline. We've known them for a long time because we're big baseball nerds. And so they were a client of mine for a little while, and you played pro baseball. And so anyway, there you go.
Yeah. So I think you must have just we must have come up in conversation together along the way, because at some point Mike just reached out to me on Twitter and we just
Yeah.
started talking all the time. And so we would just jam about stuff.
I reference your ideas like they're my ideas all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
So yeah.
So and Mike's on Twitter, and so we've interacted. And so my sons are 10 years old, and what I've learned about trying to coach them in baseball is that I'm a bad baseball coach. Is that I thought erroneously, and I don't really know why, but that being a good baseball player would make you a good baseball coach. And it is definitely not true, especially to little kids. Like, the language is all different, their bodies move different. Like, almost
It's so
nothing
hard.
I knew translated in a way that was, other than being energetic and fun. Like, but mechanically trying to help them get better, I find myself constantly frustrated, not knowing what to do.
Yeah. Coaching is a different skill set than
Totally.
the actual playing. It's really hard.
Entirely. And so I wanted to start learning how to be better at it and feeling a responsibility to help my kids develop. And in a weird way, like they more pressure in baseball in particular, like feeling like, dad, like you should be able to help me with
Yeah,
this
right.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
and so I've read a bunch of Driveline stuff. I buy all their gear. Like, so I'm sort of an evangelist and disciple, but I now want to go and try and get even deeper. And so I asked Mike, I said, hey, would you be open to me coming up and spending a few days watching you guys teach kids and getting to learn and ask
The Driveline
questions?
Academy,
Yeah.
their kids program is the coolest thing.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
So I wanted to just go be a fly on the wall, see their process and learn from them about coaching as much as I could. And he was like, perfect. I'll trade you if you come in and talk with me about services, businesses, and e-commerce and the things you have going on. We'll do it. Here's the dates. And so I'm flying up there in the first week of September, go spend 3 days just watching Driveline train kids. And there's probably 1,000 things I can learn about business
You
too.
better go hit baseballs in your
Yeah,
underwear
yeah. I'm
too.
going to try
You
and
should
get
put
some
video
of
of
my
you
own.
hitting baseballs in your underwear. So they motion capture
Yeah,
you and they read you back your biomechanical data so we can find out like how hard Taylor can hit the ball and some
yeah.
of those things. That
That'd be
needs to go
awesome.
on Twitter.
Um,
Taylor in your underwear. That'll get clicks.
so what's funny is like they actually have a similar problem to CTC in some ways, which is that their talent constantly gets poached by other organizations who pay their people more money and move on. Now, they have an even bigger draw than our people do, which is their talent gets poached by MLB
Major
teams,
league
right?
teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So their people go
The
work for the
coolest, one of the
Dodgers and
coolest
the
jobs in the
Angels, and
world.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, but they have the same thing, which is like, how do we think about how much is systems and process versus people and talent, and how do we keep them? And so I'm excited to get to chat with them about that and talk about training and also learn about how to train kids.
Yeah.
And one of the things he talks about early on, he said the number one thing you're going to learn is talk too much, and then you're going to talk less, and you're going to realize you still talk too much. And the key is to create environments they call training environments,
Yeah.
which is create the circumstance where kids can get their own feedback and make their own adjustments relative to you trying to
Yeah.
talk at them.
Well, there's a couple fascinating principles in there that I have learned that I mean, it would be hard for me to design the training environment quite like that, but like one of them is that in sports, like people's bodies are already really good at cueing them.
Yeah.
Right. So like one of the things I say is there is no perfect swing. Like actually the best swingers in baseball are people who can adjust their swing in real time really, really fast
Mm.
and can barrel balls, whatever, So there are some principles that matter, for swinging a bat fast and whatever else, and like bat speed matters and blah, blah, blah. But like there's no perfect swing. So they like are trying to say like your body actually cues you really, really well. I shouldn't parrot their stuff too much because I don't want to misrepresent it. But your body cues you really, really well. And so this like goes into the don't talk too much thing where you create drills that would allow that would and use tools that would give the body feedback that it needs without you as a coach having to say move your hands differently, right? So they have these soft balls that you hit that are like they're like sandbags basically, right? Like the small little balls full of sand anyway. And so you can feel exactly if you hit the ball right, and it cues your body back because it's full of sand and it's sort of like donuts funny if you hit it the wrong way or whatever, right? So there's that. So they create a tool that actually leverages your body's ability to go and get feedback. And then they say like, oh, people are more engaged with their training if it's fun and if it's a competition. And so just like, I mean, think about this. If you and I did a typing test, like we joked about earlier,
Yep.
right? You and I would type faster than we normally would do, right? And even then if you told us to practice typing. And it's because like competition makes you want to get better and want to be your best or whatever. So okay, so create an environment where there's a competition involved instead of just like hitting a kid endless ground balls and saying, here's the fielding triangle or whatever, right?
Exactly.
And so it's a really fascinating thing because I after spending time with them, I've thought a lot about like how in the world could we create those kinds of things in business principles? Is there
Yeah.
some way? And I even for them, it would be interesting to ask them, like, are you trying at all with your employees to create sort of like team training environments? It's so much less physical of an activity that's hard to think about. Like, what are the feedback mechanisms you give somebody if you want to teach somebody media buying? How do you give them the right feedback mechanism so that they get cued without you sitting in a meeting and coaching them? You know?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So one of the things I've thought about, if you think about the environments that we occupy, and we've talked about this before, is that what what data should you show someone in Ads Manager?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I think that we've joked all the time about like, oh,
Eliminate everything
all
but spend.
yes.
Yeah.
And but I've never actually done it.
Neither have I.
And but I wonder why. Like it, how much would it alter behavior if the only thing somebody could see was spend?
Yep.
Um, and so I think that's an example. There's also another thing I've thought about is, have you heard of this Poised AI?
No.
Okay, so Poised AI is a tool that you can put onto a Zoom call that shows you how your words per minute that you're talking while you're talking, um, and your tone. So for me,
It
I
it it would give me many words per minute.
right. So
Yeah.
it shows you your pace, your tone in the middle of a Zoom call. So
Yeah.
if I'm talking, it'll go red when you cross a threshold that's sort of scientifically proven to be like
Right.
people aren't understanding. And so it just gives me that feedback instantaneously. And imagine that versus someone telling me, Taylor, you talk too much. You should
Yeah.
practice these
Oh,
things versus just the data signal instantly showing up makes me go, "Oh,
yeah.
yes."
It
You
it
know,
there's that's a training environment. It's
yes,
it's a
exactly.
decision you set up in how you set up your way of doing the thing
That's right.
that gives you the feedback that you want. And I think like careful thinking about that kind of thing is like a very fascinating it's a very fascinating idea. It's I tried to think about this with like, e-commerce and stuff, and I just don't know. I don't know. There are people who are good at this though. There are people who are really good at building like the right dashboards and the right, daily feedback tools and
Yep.
making sure they don't have the wrong one. There's one that I sort of like that I think is that I use with clients that is like a weekly report on a few key metrics. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly what those ways you could do this are, and it probably is worthy of deeper thinking.
Yeah, it
Somebody
totally.
who is listening to or watching this
Well,
should
it's
help us
totally
think about
my
this.
my other thing is right across the street from here. My kids go to this soccer training place called Toka. Okay, and Toka is a brilliant business. It's actually, I think, closest to what the consumer version of Driveline could be, but is you go in and they've created this product, which is these little mini goals that have a sensor around them. Then there's a big screen with software on it. And then they created these balls, which is basically like a size 2 soccer ball. So imagine a ball that's smaller than all other soccer balls. Okay. And there's a machine that shoots balls out. So you have two little goals with frames and sensors, and they come in and they put you in and they start with an assessment, and they work through a series of collect, pass, how fast you touch it, how your response time, the accuracy,
Driveline
the
starts with an
speed.
assessment too. They do the
Okay,
same thing.
so your kid comes in, they don't say a word. There's a coach in there operating the machine. They don't say one word.
Yeah.
The kid goes through the whole assessment. At the end, they go
They tell you exactly how good you are.
exactly.
Right,
So
relative to
now
the
we
data
have a
set.
baseline.
So, because like it immediately that is so valuable.
So compelling too.
Right. The idea that like you could know how good you are and
That's
what
right.
parts you're good at and what parts you're not good at,
That's right.
That's so oh,
And
as
so then they take you through, then based on the areas of improvement, they have
yeah.
pre-programmed extra drills.
This is absolutely Driveline for
Yeah.
soccer. Yeah.
And so you go in
Yep.
and my kids, I drop them off. They love it. They have so much fun. The
Yeah.
coach doesn't say anything to them. It's all feedback on the software and the exercise and whatever.
And they get way better, I
And they
bet.
get better. And by the end of it, they can show you
Yeah.
that they got better.
Yes, right.
So here's your
Because they
average.
reassess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's the speed of your kick. Here's
So
the
how
average
do we
touch
do
time.
that? How do you get somebody not just to do the thing you want them to do, but to assess, train the right thing next,
Yeah.
isolate the skill, because maybe forget the AI conversation for a second, but like maybe like ad writing is a skill or
Mhm.
ad ideation is a skill versus versus media buying,
Yep.
like, and so how do and then you reassess, how do you give people those feedback mechanisms?
Yeah, so we think about this like at CTC, we have what we call growth maps, and we have a sequence of behavior that everyone in the growth map has to participate in. We call it one map, and the way that they enter in these things all gets tracked, and then people's responses, their frequency of completing the action gets tracked and responded to, and gets displayed publicly inside of the organization. So in this way, we have a collective set of behaviors that at the very least, we want them to get better at the behavior. We track it, map it, set expectation around it, and display results. So that's a pretty common training modality, right? Is that here's an expectation, here's clarity of training of action, here's an assessment and clear visibility to your completion of that action to the level that's expected. And that kind of thing is like it's good to create like a robotic set of behaviors. It doesn't
Skill
solve for
development.
skill
Yeah,
development.
that's what I was gonna say. It's like it's a
Yeah.
different thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's like the sort of the missing thing, is like, yeah,
Now the
the
question is, could you come up with behaviors that, in so much that they're done repeatedly, do lead to skill development?
right,
Like,
right. And
um,
I actually think you are doing that right now. Like, it seems
yeah,
like your people are coming out of your thing because the behaviors ladder to the outcomes, and then the outcome that everybody sees is a more profitable business on the other end of
yep,
it.
yep,
So that, like, doing that actually, what it reinforces for you is that they're doing the right behaviors.
yeah, and that's what we're trying to orient towards. What do I want you to consider all the time? And so I'm going to obligate you to a task of consideration. And so if a task is to describe to me what was yesterday's performance, which campaigns were ahead or behind, that's like what a map note entails.
Yeah,
Doing that every day is a behavior of constant analysis. And constant analysis is a thing that leads to better critical thinking and
yeah, yeah,
understanding. So there is some way in which the behavior does develop thoughtfulness or skill, especially if it's given feedback. If those notes are sort of left unruly, they could say anything. But if you have oversight and you provide question and follow up to it, then there's sort of like a almost like a Socratic way
yeah,
to have
yeah.
dialogue about ideas.
Yeah, and well, and it'll be interesting to see what you say to them about their business problem of major league teams poaching their employees too. That's a hard one to solve, but I know you've
AI.
worked really hard on it. Yeah, I mean, well, there's actually Kyle Bodie's a good follow on this, the founder of Driveline,
Yeah,
at Kyle Bodie, I think on Twitter. He because he's very AI forward. He's like really just tried to embrace it and figure out how to keep using it. And I mean, he's I mean, it's a baseball training company founded by a guy who's a programmer. And so yeah,
totally.
yeah,
I think the question, and it's the same thing I ask all the time at CTC, is like, what is the human really doing?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
really, what are they doing? If
yeah,
you actually could define their tasks this week,
yep,
what did they do? And I got into a sidebar conversation with Cam, who's like the head of advertising at Hexclad, about staffing and how because in one of my 25 hot takes, I said that like everybody has twice as
yeah,
many
right,
employees.
yeah.
And as an employee, that's probably a nightmare thing to hear because one, he's like, feels like we never, we always have too much to do. And I was like, that's actually
That's not because of the employees.
right. That actually has nothing to do.
If
That
you
is the
hired
absolutely wrong signal
twice as many
to ever
employees,
respond to.
you'd
Yeah.
still feel that way.
There's infinite things to do.
Right.
So of course there's
Yeah.
too much to do. That's actually the default state. You should never respond to that. But what I said is before I would allow anybody to hire ever, I would want to understand what everybody's tasks are and figure out which tasks we could eliminate
Yeah.
before I would hire
Yeah.
anybody else. Right.
Yeah.
And this has been a big thing at CDC is that so often early on in a service business in particular, I would respond to people saying we need more people.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's hire another person to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
like, what could we make other people not do
Yeah.
before we hired somebody
Yeah.
else?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, here's my training thing recently,
Okay.
totally unrelated,
Yep.
I think. You had put in the original random show thing, like, let's do something about, like, physical training stuff, and I
Oh,
think
yeah.
partly you had been thinking about this from some of your own training. I know, like, you did
Yep.
Murph this year, RX
Yep.
for the first time, which is really awesome. I have been thinking about mental training a little
Ooh,
bit,
okay.
so not physical training really at all. I have been thinking a little bit about mental training, and this is like for anybody who meditates regularly, they're all gonna be like, "Yeah, dude, this is why everybody's been talking about meditation."
Yep.
Probably, I think, but I don't meditate regularly, and I've never been able. I've tried a few times, right? I've never really been able to get into it, and at least not the kind of meditation that I think people think of when they think of that term. But what I've been thinking about here was actually the thought starter for me, and I'm curious what you'll think of this. I went and saw Deadpool versus Wolverine the other night.
Okay.
Okay, it's funny
Yep.
as I expected it to be. It did not ask profound questions,
Okay.
right? As nor does I.
This wasn't mental training
It
to
was
go?
not mental training.
Okay.
It actually made me. So I walked away and I was thinking about like, what is the value of that, and what place does it have in my life? And just to
Mm,
be upfront about this, I I'm not saying no one can ever go watch a fun movie. Okay. I'm not saying that. It just for whatever reason, I've watched a million fun movies in my life. I just was thinking about it this time for whatever reason. Okay. So I don't know. Maybe someday I will say you can never watch a fun movie, right? But right now I'm not saying that. But it made me think about like it felt like the equivalent of eating an extremely large cinnamon roll, or
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah.
I love cinnamon rolls. Actually, that's not a good example because I thought that was okay. But so it's but it was movie junk food. You get
Yep.
the idea, right?
Yep.
Maybe another analogy that I think is not totally far off is it felt a little bit like getting movie obliterated, you know?
Yep. Yep.
Like and just like really hammered movie wise, where you're just like immersed in this for 2 hours and there's nothing else going on. And I was thinking about like, are there sort of second order consequences to that kind of movie indulgence, to use that way of thinking about it? And should I be thinking more about what goes into my mind and how much command I have over that? And sort of like should I regulate the diet of my mental intake more carefully around things like that? The other very obvious example is like time on Twitter and just some of those things, because I've certainly noticed the thing where it's like harder for me to sit and read a book now because I just like have the like, well, I don't know, what did Taylor tweet today? It's that kind of thing. So I've just been thinking like, should I be engaging more with like more actions built around meant what I think the training framework is a helpful one. The idea of like making my mind work better for me, not only in the moment that I do the training, but actually for the broader effects, right? If I go and work out, it's not just for what I do during the workout, it's actually the spillover effect on the rest of my life. So it's a very half developed thought, but it was like just something I was thinking about the other night when I watched it. I'm just curious what you think about it.
So do you think that like have you ever played like an app like this?
What is it?
So this is something called Impulse. Okay.
No.
And it does it's like mental training. So you
Okay.
log
Yeah.
in every day
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's like number memorization, match the pairs, like like
Yeah.
candy
No,
sort, like all the
I've never done it.
they're
Yeah.
intended to be that kind of
Yeah.
idea
Right.
that like
Right.
you get better at doing mental math, like
Yeah.
in the same like so it's fun. I sometimes will go on and just
Yeah.
play
Yeah.
whatever. They give you scores. They show you what percentile you
Yeah.
are compared to other people. Like
Yes.
all
Right.
the kinds of things that are
We were just
nice and
talking about this with the
addictive.
drive line,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like
exactly.
training environment where there's competition and
That's
it's
right.
fun. Yeah.
Now, I've never tried to see if like I've made a bunch of progress or improving in some way. But if you think about like dementia or these other things, they do this kind of work to
Yeah.
try and help people
Yeah.
with brain elasticity and memorization and
Yeah.
things like that. But one of the things I'll say
That's
about
interesting.
the content consumption is I think that one of the advantages that I have in our space is that I don't know that anybody consumes more content in our space than
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And it's partially an unhealthy amount of Twitter consumption,
Yeah.
but also podcasts. I just really like it. And so
Yeah.
I just endlessly listen to it
Yeah.
all day long. Like my phone screen usage is like 11 hours.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why I think that you and I think differently about what we're building, which is that I listen to almost none. I listen to
Really.
you sometimes, but I don't have the love of the game quite like that, like you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So keep going.
And so I think that there is now that's a very narrow application of mental training to in a thing that's really only
But
useful in a very narrow band. It doesn't make me good at chemistry,
yeah.
but I do think that you can. So that's more about the content diet,
Yeah.
is that being thoughtful about your content diet relative to the things you want in your life. I think one of the things that reasons I quit fantasy baseball
Yeah.
is that I actually had to decide that spending as much time as I did
Yes.
reading about minor league prospects
Yeah.
was actually counter to what the things I said I wanted in my life were.
Yes. Right.
And so I quit. Went
And
through a
because of a Shohei Ohtani scoring
yeah,
decision.
yeah, and I had a complete and utter meltdown and anger over a ruling, an absurd ruling,
I
probably Matt Morris. So it was I blame in my head, but yeah. So that kind of thing, I do think that the choice of the content diet relative to your goals should be aligned.
yeah.
Um,
That's actually I think that is a helpful thought to what it is, because actually as you're saying that, I'm evaluating this relative to some goals of mine which are broader than this, which is like about my ability to stay focused in converse to read, like I value reading books about large topics,
yeah.
philosophical, theological
Well, so
topics.
it's funny because I bet one of the things that's actually hard for you is that there's this other part of your life that's like supposed to occupy a lot of your mental.
My faith.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like getting rid of that created an immense amount of bandwidth in my life,
Yeah, I believe that.
like a crazy amount
Okay, so
of
this is
mental
why I told you I want to
bandwidth.
talk with you more
Yeah,
about this. This is exactly the kind of thing that I want to hear about more.
yeah.
Um, Right. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to say anything more
Well,
about that?
just that,
Like
like,
the yeah.
narrowing the amount of things that I cared about actually made those decisions easier. In
Right. That's
religion in
very interesting.
particular, I
Yeah.
felt an immense constant toil that every available moment of my brain should go towards that thing.
Okay. So here's an this. So that's interesting because here's an analogy I heard somebody say the other day, which is like you want. This is a Christian pastor theologian, right? He was talking about. He said like your faith should exist as an iceberg, where like the large chunk of it is under the water, right? And
Mhm.
there's a little bit over the top. And what he means by that is like you just can't like here's a perfect example. I can't have this conversation with you
Yeah.
and be thinking as we're talking
Right.
about faith and about Jesus.
Yeah, yeah.
It's what I mean by can't is like it's actually like basically literally impossible.
Right.
And in fact, the way that I serve you and the people who are watching and listening to this and sponsors or all whatever
Mhm.
in this moment is to be as present as I possibly can with the conversation.
Sure.
And so, if my faith has formed me in such a way that the version of my presentness
Mhm.
is includes the values that I care about, which would be like, listening to you, taking your opinion seriously, trying to think the best of you as we talk, whatever, all of these things that are there, those values maybe get formed in me in a way that is, I'm actually not thinking about, am I listening carefully to Taylor right now?
You're just
I'm
doing
just
it.
being me.
Yeah.
And hopefully being me has been formed by those decisions like what content intake I have had over time. So the
Yes.
content intake, this is what I mean by the spillover effect. The content
For sure it
intake
does.
has all of these other impacts on my life. And then there's some really specific things, which is like I said, like I'm bothered by the fact that like it's harder for me to read m- as many pages in one sitting because my monkey brain goes Twitter crazy, like
Yeah.
so there's like that's like a very specific thing. And that's where I think like a lot of people are sort of aware of this, right? Like just that sort of like we're sort of dialed into the matrix all the time. But yeah, that's exactly it. It's like what is the value of that kind of content and what and how ought I to think about my content intake decisions? Your fancy baseball example is a good one for that.
Yeah. I think also this is where I still experience you as playing
Yeah.
in life, which like to me and that's okay. Like it's not good or bad. It's
Yeah.
just I think that there's periods of life where you're sort of sampling on the content side, which is like you're kind of trying to figure out whether it's what you enjoy or where to go deep or where you want to be all in, or maybe you're not all in right now and you're kind of just trying different things. And I'd say that for the last couple of years of my life, I just have a very narrower set of things.
This
I
is
got,
so clear to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like and even letting go of all of the other CTs, like closing down Dreamlabs, getting rid of my participation in Bamboo Earth. Like
Yes.
I cut down so many just little open browser
Yeah.
tabs in my brain
Yeah. Yeah.
that I think it was underappreciated how much that took. Like,
Yeah. I believe that. And again, this is part of why I'm hesitant to go push in more on some things work-wise, because I think they will demand certain things of me in a way that I'm not
yeah,
sure I'm ready to do that.
yeah,
And so yeah, I think you're right. Here's another actually interesting thing kind of related to that. And I don't know, I'm not making any judgment about what decisions you did and didn't make here, but
sure,
like the other thing that I heard somebody say this recently, I think it's true. So we'll just leave it at that. That the actual thing that is most helpful for pushing off dementia is relationships.
yeah,
And so like more than any like sort
yeah,
of overt mental training, it's like those kinds of things. And so there's this thing here. This is another thing I think about. Like, if it's harder for me to sit and play with my 4-year old because my Twitter brain is going crazy, or
yeah.
because whatever, I'm drinking in cinnamon roll content, and it's like that is like a sensory
Yeah.
content overload or whatever. There's a real cost to that in these other areas that is, or if I
Well, maybe.
my
I mean,
work content.
I think you would have to assess the quality of your relationships to
That's
do
right.
that.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that there are
Maybe is right. This is
yeah,
again half
I think that
developed.
like relationships, like the quality of them, there are things that are like really destructive to them. There are things that are like sort of destructive to them.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
there's
There's also
there's
sometimes an impossible standard that people hold
right.
themselves to, right?
Well, and but all the time, I think most people should try to. And it's hard to self assess sometimes. So you can maybe this is where good friends or other things matter, but is to be able to say like, yeah, how is my marriage? How is our relationship? Like to try and take stock of those things in a way that considers the experience of the other
Yeah.
person, not just yourself, but to ask yourself, but also ask the other
Yeah, that's
person in
right.
some way.
Yeah.
Because it seems like probably a good exercise and then to maybe try to diagnose if it has something to do with
Yeah.
your attention committed to dead.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you probably went with your wife, right?
No,
Or
no,
friends?
she would not. She does
Oh,
not.
she's not a fan? Too much
No.
sarcasm.
No, she thinks Ryan Reynolds is funny. It's like a kind of gore that she's not interested in. The funny thing is she, like, loved John Wick.
Oh,
She likes shooter movies,
she likes
like,
to see like real live shooting of real humans versus like the more
but,
animated.
like, yeah, Wolverine
Yeah.
and Deadpool stabbing each other endlessly and then regenerating and stabbing each other again, not that interested, yeah.
Okay. Let's just do a fun one real fast.
Yeah, great.
Do you know who Brady Feigl is?
No?
Oh my gosh. Okay. You have to watch this. You're gonna love this.
Okay. I'm
This
gonna let's get this so that everybody else
okay.
can see it.
This
Okay,
makes me think we're living in the Matrix.
okay.
So Brady Feigl
We'll try and get this edited into,
is the name of two minor league baseball players.
okay.
Watch.
Oh, wait. He looks exactly like somebody else, right?
A guy named listen to this. This is
Oh.
Brady
Oh, I
Feigl
have
is
heard
a
about
six
this.
foot four, fiery hair,
Yeah,
glasses wearing minor league
yeah.
baseball player. Brady Feigl is also a 6'4", fiery hair, glasses wearing minor league baseball player. They are
That
not
is
related.
incredible.
They have the same name. The Brady Feigls even took a genetic test after they discovered each other in 2016, and they're
They
not
don't
even
yeah,
remotely related genetically.
yeah.
It's
They
almost
have the
like
same beard and
we're
everything, but
in the dimension with
yeah.
the two minor league Brady Feigls. That's the identifier for this timeline. Can we get a statistician on this? How many billionth chances just that they are doppelgangers and the same height and the same exact name?
They both made it
They
to
also
professional baseball
both
as
play minor
pitchers.
league baseball?
Outside of my family, I didn't think there were any Feigls.
Look, we have to take certain things. You should always empathize with the suffering of others, stand up against justice. But this is the Matrix, and the architect is laughing. Let's not forget this too.
That's so funny.
isn't that just the wildest thing?
That is so,
Brady
so
Feigl,
2 of them.
6'4" pitchers with red
Minor
hair. They're like, you?
What?
It's just the wildest thing ever.
There's no broader reflection there, right?
It was just the most fun I had watching a piece of content because it's such an overlap of my world.
Yeah.
And seeing something, I was just, I love the internet
Yeah.
so much. It was
Yeah.
just, it was delightful. So
Uh,
Brady Feigl.
okay, let's do some lightning round
Okay.
kids and parenting stuff and whatever else that we have left and on our list here.
Did you watch that? About know what this one is?
No.
So we talked about leaving your kids money, or
Oh,
we talked about this.
yeah.
I'm actually. Can I say that I'm like an executor of your will, or if you die, or have some role?
You're like third in line to be
Okay.
the executor.
Great. So I have some
Yeah.
role in
A
the
couple
event
other people have to die
if
first, but then
Andrew and
it's
his
you.
whole family are in some sort of
Yeah.
tragic accident, then
Yeah.
I have
Then
to
yeah.
give his children.
I forgot about
their
that
money.
until right now, but
But so we've talked about this, like
Yeah.
how are you going to leave your kids their money?
yeah.
And this was an idea I really liked, which was this person set up a family trust that issues 0% interest rate loans. That's the mechanism by which the kids can access money. That they have to be paid back on a certain term. It's part of the agreement, but you have access to 0 interest rate money.
Yeah.
So rather than ever giving them money,
What happens if you default on it?
I don't know. I don't know what all the terms of
Yeah.
it are. Maybe you can't access more. Maybe there's some like
Yeah.
credit facility with
Yeah, right.
it. But the idea is that you all contribute to the family trust over time, and it's a thing that gets paid back and built and passed down.
Yeah.
I just thought that was like a really novel concept, as like it's a real leverage advantage in life to have a basically for your whole life a
Yeah.
0% credit facility,
Yeah.
but that ultimately what you borrow from it, you owe back to it.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Really interesting. I'll tell you what my thought that's really clever. My thought about how I will leave kids money at
Yep.
some point right now is I will try to do all of it before I die. That is my
Give it to your kids before you die.
yeah. So any money I'm going to give them would be given to them.
But what if you die right now?
So obviously that would be the way that this doesn't work very
So
well,
you're
right?
like, it's like a movement of die with nothing or whatever. That
I don't know if that's a movement or not, but I'm most attracted to that idea when I think about this problem right now, right? Which is like how do you do that? I think there's another question, which is like how much to
Are
give
you just
them.
gonna like randomly show up at their house with, like bags of money and be like,
No, my hope is to explain to them with total clarity. I mean, I one of the things I know about myself is that I grew up without much teaching about money, and so I developed better financial thinking way later than I would have liked to have. And so my hope is to teach my kids from a very early. I just started thinking about my 4-year-old, 2-year-old. Just started thinking like it may be time to now start giving him, you know, a allowance or some kind of
Yeah.
mechanism for beginning to teach him this concept that like things cost money. Because even like he wrote on my a little like Father's Day card he made me this year or whatever. It was like Dad's job is to make money, and that's what it said.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know really what that means. He just knows that like that's why can't play with him during the day.
Yeah.
So I've like begun to think about that. So I think that what I would probably try to do is explain to them the decision from as early as possible and try to be really straightforward about it and to let them into the family finances earlier and to just tell them understand here's how we're thinking about our money, here's how mom and I are thinking about it, here's what we're saving, here's what we're investing, here's what we're giving, here's what we're spending, all those kinds of things. So and then from an early just give them that, and that way there's also just like no post death fighting about it and some of those things. At least I head it off, but I think there's a harder question, which is like how much to give them, because this is a classic problem of if you give them too little, do they resent it? If you give them too much, and Morgan Housel points this out, like, he's like, I just don't know what the answer is here. If you get rich, if you get like really rich, like it's really hard to figure out how much money to give your kids. There are mines on every side, So
I think my will, if I die early, is like 25% at 18, 25% at 25, and 50% at 30.
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
it's like a tiered access based
Yeah.
on their age.
yeah,
Um, it's just like the idea that I just can't imagine a scenario where at 18 years old you need
yeah,
an
that much
exorbitant
money.
of
Yeah.
Not that
Well, that's kind of one little goal I've thought about is like to make it so that even at that age they could think about it well.
Yeah.
That they come into life
Yeah, that's
thinking
good.
about that as an area of mastery that they can have.
Yeah.
Just like set a high expectation around that. Um, okay. One for me, parenting wise, and some of those things that's related is there's a lot of good advice. My wife is so good about like intaking tactics for parenting stuff. She's awesome at it, and it really matters. So I'm not at all saying what.
Just laughing at the caveat it's set up here to make sure that
It's
you're
it's not just
interpreting
her. It's not just
appropriately.
her. It's
Yeah.
a lot. There's lots of parenting advice about how to do it, and I've watched it work. Right. So that's what I'm saying. Okay. Right. But there's the AC. But it is incredible how much is caught versus taught from your kids. It blows my mind. Like it is just like every time I see my 4-year-old or 2-year-old parrot something back to me that I do,
Mhm.
it is the most terrifying thing about parenting. That's the simple thought.
I like it.
Yeah. Yep.
Lightning round.
Okay. What's yours?
That was my parenting.
Jiu-jitsu?
Oh, yeah, this one. Okay. So there is a gentleman on Twitter. I actually don't know much about him. So this is one of those things where I'm always terrified of what his content actually is. I could be like advocating for someone horrific here. So just caveat that I don't know Steve Stewart Williams very well, but
Sure.
I
But you like this piece
I
of
like when
content.
people share research, and he shared.
Oh, I've seen this guy. He is like a serious white nationalist.
No, stop it. It's not funny. It makes me stressed out. But this is a data from psychology. It's a classic paper by psychologist Terry Moffat that shows how self-control measured in childhood correlates with a range of important adult life outcomes. So long story short, self-control is an all-purpose good like IQ. It predicts health, wealth, and all things good.
Yep.
Okay. One of my kids is a finger sucker.
Yeah.
He sucks his 2 fingers.
Yeah.
10 years old. He still does it when he's sleeping sometimes. I may or may not shouldn't say that,
Yeah.
but we've thought a lot about how to help him solve this problem.
Sure.
He's functionally like addicted to it in a way.
Right.
He's done it since
Sure.
he was a tiny little baby. And so we've talked a lot about self-control. I have one child that's more emotional than the others. And so
Yeah.
we thought as parents a lot about this idea of self-control. And when I saw this data, I was like, man, that as a skill, I think about this in my own life, whether it's working out, business, like it seems like self-control is just the ability to move yourself towards what you desire
Yes.
with intention and purpose, independent
Yes.
external factors, is immensely valuable.
It's part of the mental training thing for me.
Yes.
Is it fits into everything else I care about, is like exactly like that, right?
That's right. And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, that's really
So
cool.
he said jujitsu helps with it?
Well, no. So he
Okay.
said
He
this.
makes that point.
That's
Okay.
right. And then I was on TikTok and I saw Cody Sanchez talk about another study.
Exhibiting really good self-control going on TikTok.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And she was talking about how jujitsu is a proven skill developer of self-control.
Yeah.
So kids who do jujitsu develop and improve statistically in their self-control.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, wow, that feels like a cool causal chain, that if self-control is a great
Yep.
predictor of all these life events.
Get your kids into
and there's
jujitsu.
exactly. And so there's right down the street from here, one of the kids who's in our little league, his dad runs the jujitsu gym down here, and a bunch of kids go and do it. And I never did jujitsu,
No,
so
yeah.
it's like not a thing I would do intuitively. But I've thought, oh man, that's an interesting place to go work out that discipline of self control.
It's funny. An adult friend of mine who is a longtime CrossFit guy and stuff like that. Like he started doing jujitsu a couple years back, and he was like, "Yeah, you should do this, and your boys should do it." And it was sort of like he meant like it's not just like good. I like jujitsu. It was like there's like value here in a way that is like translates into a lot of different stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. I'm gonna go chase down that content.
Yeah.
Show notes for all that stuff, of course. Okay. Do we have anything
we've
else?
Covered that. No.
Yeah,
Do
no.
you have anything
You
else?
want to say a last thing about this? That's probably too
No,
big of a
we've covered
topic
it.
for this.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's everything.
I mean, we're what, 3 hours in here?
No, not 3, right? Come
Which
on.
one we started
2,
at 8?
right? No, we did not start at 8. We're not even 2 hours in. We
Okay.
got another hour. Let's go.
I mean,
No, we're not doing another hour. I got to go home.
no, yeah, I agree. This is good. We got awesome feedback on the last one.
Yep.
And it's exciting
I
to,
don't think I yelled at you enough this time.
we didn't really argue much. We got to find more contentious topics.
Yeah.
Andrew wants to have a conversation with me about my deconstructed religious experience. Maybe we would record it. I don't
Dude,
know.
I mean, I would do that. That's completely up to you.
I'd have to work out where that would end up.
Yeah.
There is a podcast related to CTC's experience related to everything that we went through on the DEI side and how that topic relates to present day and things that have
That
happened
episode,
there.
you mean?
I'm just saying, like,
Or the series of podcasts. Is it one episode or is it a series? Because I listened to an episode with.
No, I'm saying that is a topic of conversation.
I would love to talk about that. Yeah.
So that it feels like maybe in the random show sometimes that whole experience.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't talk the election. We could have covered. You know, we could have. I'm just trying to think
really
of
try to alienate the DDC community.
How could we spice it up? Yeah.
No, I don't know. I think what I need to do is go make a bamboo earth ad that wins, and then you can tell me why it didn't work.
Please do that. That is you. There is an obligation on you after you're just staunch. I think you've actually backed off the long form explainer.
Not really. Yeah,
No?
we're still using them a lot. Yeah, I got a new client. It'll be the first thing we develop. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
We didn't talk about ugly ads. We did a little.
We did a little.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, it's fine. I don't mind your point too much there. I think
you came up with a new phrase I heard on your podcast today. Text in context.
Oh,
It's
just a stupid way that I just needed a label for an ad type.
Yeah.
And all I mean by that, text in context is in the text of the photo is not overlaid on the image. It's in the context of the image, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't, and they could be a post-it. Like a post-it is the most obvious example of that, but we do it with all kinds of things, letterboards and chalkboards and whatever else. So, yeah. All right. That's it. That's probably enough. We can argue next time.
All right,
great.
everybody.
Give us feedback again. We're super appreciative of anybody who spent 2 hours listening and all that stuff. And we really do read and care about your feedback. So please send to us. All right. Thanks.
Take care.
Taylor.
What?
We're at your office this time, not in my backyard.
I know.
I think it looks better.
It's funny though, like the amount of technology setup we did when there's like computers all around us to create this, like, and we're on this rickety
I know.
table.
I'm already nervous about how much you're going to bang into the table and make noise.
We're going to get this better each time. And this is definitely an improvement from your backyard, but only moderate.
Yeah, I think it's better. It's like, I don't know. We'll see how much the AC going on and off.
Gotta create some contrast too. We both wore gray shirts.
Yeah.
Blend it.
I should probably keep the window open. All right. What was I going to say to you?